Hello, it's Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, and this is the first of a series of video blogs that I've been meaning to do on the classic car market, the classic car business, and how to restore a car. So we'll start with that. Let's say you have a car and you need it restored. How do you go about finding the right people or the right company to do that? Okay, so first of all, we need to maybe define some terms. When I say restore, for the purposes of this vlog, I'm talking about a ground-up restoration where you take the car right back to the bare shell and then build it up, every nut and bolt. So concours restoration, nut and bolt restoration, ground-up restoration, it all means about the same thing. Okay. Now, if you haven't done that before, you probably will drastically underestimate the amount of time it takes to do that. Even a simple restoration on a basic car, if you know what you're doing and everything goes smoothly, wouldn't be any less than about 500 hours. More commonly, I would expect on collector cars that have good network of spares and so forth, that are relatively easy to work on, might be 1,000 hours. When you start getting into pre-war cars or Pebble Beach quality cars where you have to remake a lot of the parts from scratch, where it might not be so easy to just call up the supplier and get a new part delivered in a week or so on. Sometimes they need to do lots of research, from looking at old photographs and stuff, and build stuff from scratch using old photographs. It can get extremely time consuming, and those can go all the way up to about 5,000 hours or something like that for a pre-war car that you might see on the lawn at Pebble Beach. For businesses, shop rates for new cars, and I'm in Canada, so I'm quoting in Canada in Canadian dollars, might be, for a new car, it might be $140 to $160, and the independents might be $125. And you might get somebody, like a shop, to restore a car. Somebody might do it for $100, or more likely it's probably $125 an hour. And in the U.S., I believe it's not that much different, around $100 an hour. So if you times 500 hours times $100 an hour, that's $50,000 just for the labor. That means that any restoration on any car is going to be expensive. For collector cars, there's a lot of cars that when they're done aren't going to be worth $50,000. So I guess the first thing you need to do is to really ask yourself, do you have the right car to start with? And then what are your aims when it's done? If it's just for you and you're just going to drive it, it wouldn't matter. But if you get it done and you need to sell it, there's a lot of people who take fairly instant losses on their car, and some fortunate person picks the car up for 50 cents on the dollar. It's not much fun if you're the guy who restored it, and it's happened to me. Okay. When you're looking to restore the car, then how do you choose the right person, and then how do you manage that relationship, and how do you manage that job? It's restoring a car is really interesting in that probably 75% of the work could be done by just about anybody, including yourself, because what it is just taking stuff apart, running stuff around to various places to get it, powder coated or cadmium plated, or running to the specialist to get certain jobs done, etc. It's extremely time consuming, but it's not that difficult. Anybody could do it. There are other jobs which you need like 10 years of practice if you're going to do it well, welding or something like that. You can't just pick that up and do a nice job. I mean, it takes lots of practice. There are other jobs that require a lifetime of judgment to know what pitfalls to avoid and so on. And then there's jobs where they're very mark and model specific. In other words, the first time that somebody needs to rebuild the suspension in a 60s Mercedes that has air suspension in it is going to spend an awful lot of time learning how to do the job. And you don't necessarily want to have to be paying somebody $100 or $125 to learn on your car. And yet, if you hire them to do it, they have a reasonable expectation that they're going to be paid for whatever they're going to do. Okay, it would be rare for them to say, well, I spent 50 hours trying to get the suspension to work, but you know what? Because I think somebody much more experienced than I could have done it in 5, I'll only charge you 5. I mean, you might get 40 instead of 50, but you're still going to be paying a lot more than the person who really has done the job many times before and knows the ins and outs of it. So when you're bringing your car to a specialist or a shop, you really want to make sure that within the scope of the work that you're giving them, that they have the expertise to do the work, and that can be challenging to find. It might not be in your area. It may be inconvenient for you to have to trailer the car somewhere else to have somebody work on it in another city. However, that could very well be the most sensible idea. To get around the idea of so much of this work is really menial labor, and yet once you give it to the shop, you don't have much choice but to pay $100 an hour for somebody to do it. And that could be $100 an hour for somebody to sort through bolts and nuts and bolts, okay? If there's a way that you can subcontract it, keep the car in your garage, disassemble it yourself, farm the bodywork out, farm the powertrain out for the skills that you might not have, and then you can be entrusted to disassemble and assemble the car back whilst learning all about it. That's probably the ideal situation, although you may or may not have the time for that. At the top of the food chain, you have the Paul Russells and the Canapas and so on, and they have master upholsterers and master metalworkers, etc., and then a whole league of apprentices as well. So those operations work well. They're very expensive. I mean, I don't think Paul Russell would restore any car for less than $400,000 US. But if you can find that on a smaller scale, then that would probably be ideal. Just to pay one guy to do it, that would be asking a lot, I think, and probably not going to work out that well. Not to say that it can't happen. Now the shops charge $100 or $125 an hour. You can also find individuals who might do it, in their own garages on their off time for less money. That is, in my experience, fraught with frustration. When people say they'll give you a better price, but they'll work around their schedule and they'll get to it when they can, and for that, it'll take longer, but they'll do it for less. That can be very appealing if you sort of add up the hours and the $100 an hour. It may be the only way you think you can justify getting the work done. But what happens, in my experience, more often than not, is that the car just sits there, and then you have to chase the guy. And then for one reason or another, your car is not getting worked on. And it just isn't, it just doesn't usually have the commitment to be able to put in regular time on the car. And if you're not putting in regular time on the car, it'll just never get finished. And then what'll happen is that you just start getting mad and start yelling and screaming. And then you get a big bill anyway, and so I don't really recommend that. I mean, if you were going to do it, in a garage, put it in your own garage, and maybe think about being a subcontractor and taking it apart yourself, or even bringing people in to help you take it apart yourself, but controlling it and always having possession of the car. Once you give it up to somebody in their own garage, hoping that you're going to get a good deal when they get around to doing it, is probably not going to work out. I wish I'd take my own advice. I did that recently, and sure enough, it ended in tears. So, what that would mean, though, is that you're probably going to look at a lot of situations, look at the $100 or $125 you have to spend, and think that it just isn't worth it to restore the car. And you might be right. You might be right, because any car done well isn't going to be any less than about $50,000 in labor, plus all the parts, and that means that's a $75,000 to $100,000 project. And of course, most collector cars aren't worth that much money. So I guess the second piece of advice is to really think long and hard before you start the project, and then select the right car, and select a car where the value is going to be there. There's just all kinds of terrible stories about, people having a car, wanting it restored, getting an optimistic price quote, from a restoration company, then having the car, completely disassembled, and there's this problem and this problem and this problem and this problem, etc., as there always is, and then winding up completely upside down in the car, and then needing to sell it and walking away from half their money. So before you start, you really want to take an honest assessment of what you're going to do with the car when it's done, and don't fall into the trap that I guess we all do, of underestimating the cost of the restoration. It's better to pick the best people, the most experienced people. You'll find that it's tough to get your car in. You'll find that you might have to wait a year to get your car in. It's worth finding the people with the best reputations, most experience, the greatest amount of customer testimonials. Wait until they'll take your car, and then just pay what they want. You'll get the best result. It'll cost you probably the same or less, and you'll enjoy the process a lot more. Once you try to think, well, I'll just go to this guy, it's a better price, he can do it on his own, doesn't usually work out that much, that well. Now, and I guess finally, the last piece of advice that I have is to be involved. It might be hard if you're shipping your car somewhere else. Maybe you find the ideal person for your job, and it might not be convenient to go there and check in on the car. But it really makes a big difference, I think, if they know that you're going to come and visit, that you're on it, that you're there to answer the hundreds and thousands of little questions that come up. How do you want to do it? Do you want to do it this way or that way? Or this came up. Should we do this new part here, or this reproduction part, or try to get this to work? Or here's, you have all these decisions to make, and you'll get the best result if you're really involved, and you make a physical appearance wherever possible, just so they know you're coming to look at it. And also, I think there's a sense that they might be more appreciated than just sending them a check if you can look at the workmanship that they do, because there's a fair amount of pride that goes along with working on these cars and doing a good job. So I hope that helps. If it's going badly at the beginning, if you're not getting good communication, if you're not getting monthly statements, if you're not getting the photographs, if there's too many excuses, if there's too many things that come up, if you're looking at the work and it's just not right, you may have to pull the car. It probably won't get any better. You probably shouldn't make excuses for the guy. You don't want to go pick up your car, and it might be in a million pieces, but the sooner that you do that and get your car out of there, the better. Otherwise, it'll probably just drag on, and whatever hassle you have now, it'll probably be worse in the future. So I would choose the car well, type of car it is. I would choose the best example. I mean, it's always better to start with a car that's less rusty than more rusty. For instance, choose the people that are going to be working on the car carefully. Make sure that they have the expertise, and make sure they have the right people in place to do the right kinds of jobs, and make sure they're geared up to give you, regular statements, regular photographs, and so on. and make sure that they are, even if they're slow, at least if there is a constant, regular progress on the car, it'll get done. It's a big red flag when months go by and nothing's happened. You really need to question that. So anyway, I've learned all this the hard way, of course. The hard way. And so I hope this was of some benefit. And I'll continue a series of video blogs on various topics in the future. But thank you very much for viewing. Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada.